Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksharan Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So should I ask you the most deadly question? What do you remember so far? Who can give me a very high level summary? Anybody? Okay, here's the overview. You can cheat from here. Let's see if somebody can say something before I actually show it. Please don't feel shy. I know it was a long time ago. I'm not looking for perfection. It was once upon a time.
I think
Okay, how does... Go ahead, yeah.
So I recall what we discussed in the last mantra, mantra 8, which is realization of Mahabhagavat.
Okay.
And, the aspects of the transcendental nature of the body, purity, and I think you spoke about the greatest and each of the words, what they translate to.
Okay.
Within that mantra. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. Who remembers the invocation? What is the invocation talking about? It's talking about the Lord being what?
Complete.
Complete. And all forms of incompleteness that we experience are because of?
Our incomplete knowledge
of the Supreme. Yeah.
Yeah, of the complete whole. Very good. So here is the invocation to mantra 3. So it talked about basically the completeness of the Lord and then the perfect relationship between the Lord and the living entities and his creation, right? So mantra 1 really is like the core, essence, or you can call it the Paribhasa Sutra in one sense of ISOPANISAD, where we heard about the proprietorship of the Lord, right? So the more we remember this, the more our consciousness will be elevated and we'll see the connection of Krishna with everything else. So this is, the more we understand this, the more we realize this, really, it'll help raise our consciousness and vision. And the more we forget this, as Prabhupada writes in the purport to mantra 9, the more we forget this, the more we go into darkness, right? So when we understand the proprietorship, natural thing to do would be to surrender, right? And then the usual idea of surrender is that don't work, leave everything, just surrender. But then in mantra 2, we heard that actually we should work. But how should we work? We should work in a surrendered mood, that this is not for me, this is for Krishna. And we saw the different levels of that work also on the platform of Karma Yoga and as well as platform of Bhakti Yoga. And then mantra 3 talks about what if you don't do that? What happens? We go to the darkest regions of hell, and we're basically Atmaha, killers of the soul, right? And then mantra 4 and 5, they talked about who is this Lord? Who is this Isha? This Isha has contradictions, right? And that's, if something is complete, an absolute. Actually, all contradictions are meant to be there. You cannot have a complete system without some contradictions. So Krishna is the absolute whole, and naturally he has contradictions then. And Jiva Goswami says that if we want to understand God, the first thing you have to understand is that he's inconceivable, right? So we heard about the inconceivable nature of the Lord. And then in text 6 through 8, we heard about the vision of the Mahabhagavat, how they are beyond the influence of time. By seeing the connection of everything with the Lord, they see the Lord in everything and everything within the Lord. And because of that, they don't hate anything. And naturally, then they don't also have any illusion or lamentation or anxiety, right? So because why? Because Krishna is free of these things. And they're seeing Krishna everywhere. So naturally, they're also free of these things. So today we'll cover mantra 9, 10. I thought to do 11 too, but then I felt it'll be a bit too rushed. So we'll just do 2 mantras, 9 and 10. In one sense, mantras 9 to 14 are an expansion of mantra 3. Because what did mantra 3 talk about? That if you don't apply yourself according to the principles given in mantra 1, which is that you're not accepting the proprietorship of the Lord, then you go to the dark regions. So here we're going to hear that theme further. Who are these killers of the soul? The people who cultivate avidya, as well as people who cultivate vidya, so-called vidya. So we'll hear further. And so the absolute and relative, that's what we're going to hear about. And then that's in terms of knowledge, and then in terms of worship. So 12 to 14 is in terms of worship. And of course, 15 to 18 is prayers for the revelation. So in terms of knowledge, so let's read mantra 9. Andam tama pravishanti ya vidyam upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yau vidyayam rataha. Those who engage in the culture of nascent activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. So what is this dark region of ignorance? The dark region means that basically you can go down in 2 ways. You can literally go to the hellish planets, or you can go to the lower forms of life where your consciousness very much becomes contracted or very much in ignorance. So what is, if we were to summarize mantra 9, 10, 11, I don't know if you read 9, 10, 11, but if we were to give one word for these 3 mantras, what would that be? Anybody want to give it a shot? What are we, what's basically, what's something we want to learn from here? Like mantra 9 and 12, they're speaking about some extremes, right? Mantra 10 and 13, they're speaking about how to receive this proper knowledge, or how to properly worship, how to learn about that through parampara. And what's mantra 11 and 14, I think. I might have the number mixed here, but anyway, 11 and 14, that's right. 11 and 14, what are they talking about?
Transcendental knowledge.
Transcendental knowledge, okay.
Mortality.
Mortality, all right. So we want to, so what are these verses saying? So they're talking about the extreme, they're talking about where to get the proper knowledge from. But in between what is also talked about, or in the last verse of these each sets of 3, what is talked about? That you should know this and you should also know that. right? Yes. So speaking of balance, how to actually bring about balance. And this is, of course, a very important principle of yoga. Like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Samatvam yoga uchyate in 248. So equanimity is actually what is called as yoga, right? You don't want to go to this extreme or that extreme. And not because you like it or you don't like it, but you want to, balance in such a way that it actually pleases the Lord and it's helpful for us to on the path of self-realization, right? It sounds very simple, but actually it's not so simple to, find this balance. And I think in our life, we're constantly trying to find that balance. It's just like some devotees give the example of when you're on a flight, what is the pilot mainly trying to do? He's, trying to keep the flight on course, because the wind makes it go this way or that way, and you're just trying to keep it on course. And I think that's something we're all too familiar with, trying to find that balance in our life. Yeah. So we're going to learn what is this balance between this knowledge, the avidya and the vidya. And we'll hear some shocking things too. And these mantras may in some way, stir us and, disturb us, but that's a good thing, right? So here it is. So mantra 9 will evaluate ignorance and pseudo knowledge. And, the translation to Prabhupada's translation, it's a little bit of a purported translation because in Sanskrit, the word is just avidya. Right? Avidya means nations or ignorance, but Prabhupada already gives it away. He says so-called knowledge, right? So pseudo-knowledge, so-called knowledge or pseudo-knowledge. And mantra 10 is defining spiritual knowledge as distinct from both ignorance and pseudo-knowledge. And mantra 11, it tells us to cultivate the material and spiritual knowledge side by side. So this is the balance verse. So how do we cultivate that material and spiritual knowledge side by side without getting lost here or there? How to keep that focus, right? So that's what we learn. So I said this was a continuation of mantra 3 in one sense, because it's describing the killers of the soul, those who are going to this dark, hellish places of ignorance. So what are the two broad categories again here? It's vidya, avidya, and vidya. Okay, so who are put in this category of avidya? Who can tell me?
Pseudo knowledge.
Huh?
Pseudo knowledge. Person who is having that, like avidya means ignorance.
Ignorance. Okay. So what is the example given here of the ignorant? Who are they? Who are these people?
Those pursuing materialistic knowledge.
Atheist.
Materialistic knowledge. Okay.
Or trying to excel in that.
Yeah, that's right. So avidya is, do you have a name for them? Like based on the Bhagavad Gita verse, Namam dushkritito moda prapadyante naradama mayaya prahrita jnana asuram bhava mashita. Which of they are? Which of those are these people?
Mayavadis.
Avidya. We're talking about avidya.
Mudas.
Mayavadis have knowledge. Mudas. Yes. Muda. Yes, that's right. So mudas. So they are the simple fools or the asses or the vikarmis or the gross materialists. These are these people. So they basically never think, where this is going to lead them, whatever they're doing. They're just simple fools. And Prabhupada says that 99.9% of people in the modern civilization, they're like this. They are engaged in the activities of sense gratification under the flags of industrialism, economic development, altruism, political activism, and so on. All these activities are more or less based on satisfaction of the senses to the exclusion of the kind of God consciousness described in the first mantra, right? So basically, they don't really think about the future. And they're called mudas because they're quite foolish. They never come to Krishna because they're so covered by ignorance. And muda means ass. They're compared to the asses. And ass is basically a symbol of, stupidity in one sense, right? Why? Because the ass carries a load that does not, belong to him. It's not our quota. We're not meant to be asses. We discussed that before. So not our quota. And, just all that for just a little grass, which is there on both sides of the road anyway, but it thinks that it cannot get that grass unless it carries all this load. We never see, other animals like cows or deer, etc., carrying this huge load for a little grass, right? But as it has a particular mentality, and that's why, this animal is used oftentimes in scripture. It has this mentality that unless I work hard, unless I carry this load, I'm not going to get the result, And perhaps most of the modern civilization is like this, isn't it? We just feel like we have to work hard. And if we don't have a boss and if we don't work hard, then, we're wasting our life or something. So another thing about the asses is also that they can be very stubborn. Sometimes it just doesn't move. It just doesn't want to. So, and that's a feature of ignorance also. Ignorance doesn't let us move, right? Because the characteristic of ignorance is lethargy, procrastination. It's very difficult for people influenced by ignorance to kind of shake off things and actually move, especially when that really catches them. So what does the, should I say, ass keeper? What does the ass keeper do? He hangs a carrot from the, from the neck of the ass, and dangles the carrot in front of the ass so that it keeps looking at the carrot, the fruit at the end of the stick, and it keeps moving and moving and moving. So basically, this is the whole psychology of the sense gratifiers who hope to get enjoyment with the next object and the next object, but they just don't get it. And of course, our whole advertising industry, and now the advertising industry is all over social media, on our cell phones right there. They're just getting us, and and you all know that social media means that they understand your psychology and they keep increasing that nature or tendency that you have because they get a feedback with everything, and then you keep seeing those same kind of whatever, short videos or ads or whatever. And, so that same psychology that we have is actually reinforced further and further. So basically, with karma is, whimsical, most of the modern world. And what is the result of this? More ignorance. And who are the two categories in Vidya, or so-called knowledge, that Prabhupada talks about?
Mayavadis.
Mayavadis, yeah. Mayavadis, I would say, are under a certain category. What is the broad category?
Transcendentalist, Mataji.
Transcendentalists, okay. But
Is
in
that
this
Maya Aparita Jnana?
Yes, Maya Prahrita Jnana. And what's the word used for them in this verse?
Veda Brata.
Okay, so that's the other category. Veda Vada Ratha, that's the other category. So they're also called as Vidyayam Rataha or Veda Vada Ratha. And the other category is the Mayavadis or Maya, no, sorry, not Mayavadis, Maya Prahrita Jnana. who include the Jnanis, the Mayavadis, the mundane wranglers, and the Vedavadarata, or the Karmis, are the materialistic religionists, the Smartha Brahmanas. They are not aware of the purpose. So what are some things Prabhupada says here about the Vedavadarata people? What are their characteristics? Such people, what do? They misguide others by misinterpreting the Vedic literatures. They may condemn the Puranas, right? And they give their own explanations of the Vedas, neglecting the authority of great teachers. And they also tend to raise some unscrupulous person from among themselves and present him as the leading exponent of the Vedic knowledge. So these are the kind of people who are quite attached to rituals. They may be attached to going to the heavenly planets or sense pleasures, right? Let me ask you all a question. Before you came to Krishna consciousness, were many of you attracted? Were you like looking for some kind of philosophy or doing yoga or just seeking some higher principles? I bet most of you were, if I asked you to raise your hand. Yes or no? What do you think? Yes. I think the answer is a yes, right? Anybody would like to share? Were you looking for higher principles or, practicing yoga, or we're looking for some philosophy, some higher truths? Yes, right? Nobody's saying a yes, but I assume it's a yes. So I'm going to go on.
Hare
It's hard
Krishna.
on Zoom sometimes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, in a ritualistic way, we used to do all the kirtanas and everything in the evening and morning, but no such relations. Trying to understand why we were doing. No, that loving attitude was not there. So somehow or other hankering, I was thinking, my dad.
You were hankering.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were hankering for something. So yes, while most of us might have been looking for some kind of higher philosophy or yoga or, just seeking some higher principles, just working with this understanding that there's got to be something more and I'm looking for it, but don't know where to find it. And perhaps many kind of organized official religions, I shouldn't say organized, but official religions, maybe things that we came across, but perhaps we're not attracted to any of these official religions. Because usually, right? Because usually what passes off as religion is this Vedavadarata tendency. Be a good girl, do good things and, follow the rituals, do this, don't do that, and so on. Yeah. Because typically religion means that's what it is. But perhaps most of us, although exposed to them, we were not attracted by those simply because we had exposure to even a little iota of bhakti somewhere before in our previous life, right? So like for me too, when I was young, I had faith in God. I had faith that there was one God, but I was never particularly attracted to any particular God. I always used to pray, I know there's one God. I don't know who you are, but whoever you are, listen to my prayer, So I was not attracted to any particular religion because I was really looking for something, higher. One time, somebody at the funeral, he was giving a sermon and he was saying, yeah, we come into this world with nothing and we go with nothing. So please think, what is this life meant for? Is it just for collecting more money or furniture or accolades or, whatever, bigger houses and cars and so on? What is it? But most people were disturbed by that kind of a sermon because, they also think that religion is meant for giving all these things, right? So usually people have this thinking that they're actually quite knowledgeable, right? And they think that they're also not doing any sin. So these are all people in the Vedavada Ratha category. Like, for example, sometimes you go on book distribution or something, and you may tell somebody, hey, this is a book of knowledge telling us what to do, what not to do. And someone may say, well, I'm, 60 years old, and I think I know, I have enough knowledge. I don't need the book. Or you tell someone, okay, this is a book that'll help you become free from sin. And they may say, no, I don't think I commit any sins, and they may be carrying bags of meat, but they feel that, they have enough knowledge that they're not committing any sin. Or when we meet Indians, typically when we go book distribution, they have a tendency to say that, oh, I know Krishna. I love Krishna. I go to temple on Janmashtami. I know about him. I'm sure you meet many people like that. And particularly, I don't want to isolate any one particular state or something, but Gujaratis particularly, they really feel like they know Krishna and love Krishna. And that's wonderful. They do have, most of them have Krishna deities in their home, Bal Gopal Krishna, but it doesn't really mean that they understand much more than that. So people think they're religious because they go to the temple once a week, or they know a little bit, of the do's and don'ts and whatever. But this verse is telling us that these are all Vedavada Rataha. That means that they only have so-called knowledge, and they're all going to darkness, right? And then the next category is Mayaya Pahrita Jnana. So Mayaya Pahrita Jnana means that these are people whose knowledge has been stolen by illusion, according to the Bhagavad Gita definition. So they are the Jnanis, they are the Mayavadis, so basically the impersonalists. So these Jnanis, they may even study Vedas, but they don't follow any parampara, and their way of trying to understand any knowledge is just mental speculation. And actually, these Mayavadis, they're even more condemned in Mantra 12. They say, it's said in Mantra 12 that they go to even more darker region, the impersonalists. And that's quite bewildering when you hear that first, right? Because you think that, yeah, at least, maybe they'll merge in the Brahmajyoti or something. So how come it's saying even more darkness? Basically because when somebody is impersonal in their tendencies, right? Their impersonalism, that means they don't acknowledge any person, any like power in their life in one sense, higher source to be a person. Because person means it always brings about some kind of, accountability. But when it's impersonal, that whole philosophy encourages the atheists and the sense gratifiers even more. Why? Because they say that everyone is God, and therefore, you can have pastimes, and, they have no real practical ways of sense control. That's not their primary thing, they're after name, fame, and so on. So, and they like to make people into gods and so on. Or, the other is the nihilism idea, or like the Buddhists, they merge into nothing. That's basically a spiritual suicide. Who is the person reaching nirvana if you're not even there, if you're nothing, if you become nothing and you merge into nothingness, where are you? So what's the point of the whole thing, right? So these are all Mayaya Pahrita Jnanas. Yeah. So then certain examples are given to help us understand. What are some examples given in this verse? Analogies, I should say. Two striking analogies. What are the analogies? To illustrate the so-called knowledge, how it's more hurtful than not having any knowledge. Ignorance is better than having so-called knowledge. There is a reptile. Yes, somebody can tell me the analogy now, the Cobra analogy, right? And the decorations on a dead body. But I was also thinking of another analogy here, borrowed from Urmila Mataji, actually. Here's a little bee or some insect. It somehow got into the house and it's trying to get out of this room right now. But this door has a mirror. And in the mirror, what does it see? It thinks that the mirror is actually the way out. In the mirror, it sees itself and it's trying to get out through that, right? So this is the so-called knowledge of the bee. It thinks the mirror to be actually the way out because it's seeing also not only himself, but the reflection from behind. So it thinks there's more behind. But the door is actually open, but it cannot fly away, right? And this is what the so-called knowledge does to us. We're looking for, eternity and happiness and knowledge and so on. And we want a vibrant kind of life free from fear. But we are trapped like this with a hope against hope. We get fooled by ignorance, which looks like knowledge. And what is the Cobra analogy? What's the Cobra analogy? Why is the cobra with the jewel can do more harm? What is a simple cobra and what is the cobra with the jewel? What is it being compared to?
The one with the jewel seems to be more attractive.
Attractive, right. So simple ignorance or a simple fool is just like a regular cobra or a regular snake. Maybe you cannot trust any snake. It doesn't know what he's doing, but it works hard. But the so-called knowledgeable person is actually like a cobra with a jewel because he attracts attention. He looks glittering, he looks hopeful, he looks optimistic, right? If we see a cobra, we'll run away. But if it has a jewel, it may get attracted and then be bitten by it, right? So it's like you're thirsty, you can drink water. A simple person may just drink water, but a sophisticated person will never drink water. That's, we can see it all around. They only drink soda or Coke, which is basically liquid plastic, nothing else. Or nowadays, people, from villages are always running to the cities. And people from the cities, they run to the West because we are attracted by the jewel of material knowledge, the whole advertising industry. And, it's everywhere. That's how the advertising industry or nowadays, these short videos are such a thing, right? They have some catchy titles and then they just catch us through that. Do this and you will get good health or something. Okay, never eat an avocado without reading this. Something like that. Some really like things that just attract you and draw your attention, and then you click on it. And then you're just drawn into something and there's nothing very useful there anyway. The whole thing is they're trying to get you to buy their product or, come to them and get a session with them or something like that, right? So it's just this cobra with a jewel. And then the other is the decoration of dead body analogy. Well, why do we decorate dead bodies? Why is it done? What do you all think? Why do we decorate dead bodies?
Pacify those who are left behind.
Pacify those who are left behind, yes. Yeah.
Royal treatment.
Royal treatment, okay.
So generally, we are afraid of seeing dead bodies, Mataji. So to give a good presentation, probably.
Yes, yes. So it gives pleasure to the relatives, sometimes to show the status of a person, like someone said, or to hide or basically mask the reality because it's ghastly to see a dead body. People are scared, but then you dress them up. Doesn't look as bad. right? And how does that compare to modern education? Basically, it hides reality and covers the miseries. That's what modern education does. And it makes everything look extra attractive, right? It makes, just it multiplies the objects of sense gratification. It makes everything more available, more attractive, creates an artificial kind of necessity, right? It just stimulates our senses. And so all these things, and then the means to, achieve these so-called attractive things itself that they're promising, even the means can be so ghastly and nasty sometimes, right? Sometimes at the cost of killing others or, animal killing and so on. Yeah, all for a little satisfaction. It covers the miseries. So I like this sentence of Prabhupada. I'll just look at it a little more closely. Modern civilization has advanced considerably in the field of mass education, but the result is that people are more unhappy than ever before because of the stress placed on material advancement to the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect. So, this is something we can all see practically everywhere. So there's so much mass education. Sometimes Prabhupada actually said, no education is better than mass education. And we see the result, when you do the happiness survey, all over the world. Sometimes people living in the poorest countries are actually the happiest. Like Bangladesh at one point of time, was #1 in the happiness quotient. Or even in India, it's disappearing in India too because of, it started disappearing when the TV started, the Star TV and so on. But now after the smartphones, it's just very, very rapidly degrading everything. But still, you see in some small places, like the remote areas of Vrindavan or other villages, those people seem so happy and satisfied. They have a smile that's coming from their heart, not like the smile we see in the West. Everybody smiles here and everybody says hi, but the hi and the smile is like a, like a half plastic smile. Hi, like that. Half plastic smile, so insecure and, sometimes greed and all that. But yeah, like sometimes, the simple chaiwalas in India, just with a little gamcha. They get a few rupees, but they just have a big smile. They have smile because they have relationships, satisfying relationships. Of course, now even the chaiwalas have smartphones. Every sabjiwala has a smartphone nowadays. So it's kind of, even they are becoming miserable nowadays. Nobody is happy because of this, because they keep comparing themselves to others because of social media. There's this whole thing called beautiful people syndrome, right? Because everybody in social media, what do? They put their best over there. And so you think that is them, but that's not, actually their baseline. They all also have struggles, just like all of us. Anyway, so people become more and more insecure and more miserable because they're constantly feeling like they don't have something. Or you can take anything from the modern civilization. You take the soil, it had previously maybe 80 minerals and now maybe it has 8 minerals. You would get the amount of iron needed from just eating a cup of spinach before. Now you can eat a whole bag of spinach and you still don't get the iron that's necessary, so that you have to take supplements. And then in the supplements, there's all these additives and which are not very good. Then you have to find food-based vitamins. And then anyway, it's everything is so complex, right? So many fertilizers, everything. The stomach feels full, but you don't have energy. Like I have had so many health issues and stuff, and And so I have low energy levels. But then all around, I hear like 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds nowadays just complaining of poor energy levels, right? They're eating well, but no energy because nothing has real substance. So naturally, it behooves us to think, what kind of vidya do we have? What kind of knowledge do we have? Or what to speak of the means, we get it by killing others, importing oil, just so that my children can stay in a desert and be happy. And then the country has huge debts. Or every day, like 1 million cows are killed. Or, in school, I learned that oxygen is 21%, but now it's not 21% anymore, right? This mantra is really good for preaching, actually. So we have to think what knowledge we have. So Srila Prabhupada, was saying this, that no education is better than mass education. He would say that sometimes. Because what are these so-called places of modern education doing? They're just systematically training people in avidya, ignorance. And the result is that we become killers of our own souls and other souls. And so it's not a wonder then that Prabhupada often called the modern schools and universities as slaughterhouses, because we are killing the soul. We're depriving it of its true potential. We think, just like that little bee, we think we have some knowledge, we have some understanding, but it's just trapping us more and more. So what is real knowledge then? If this is all so-called knowledge, real knowledge basically means that we get some information or skills or values that lead one to transcending the material world and attaining self-realization and God realization or transcendental knowledge. Or real knowledge is also defined as, to see things as they are. That's what real knowledge means. So what can we do? All of us who are studying ISOPANISAD, who are studying Bhakti Shastri, what should we do? We should cultivate this right kind of knowledge. So therefore, the importance of studying Srila Prabhupada books very deeply, not just for the sake of, just Bhakti Shastri exam, because the Bhakti Shastri exam, which you just get a question bank, each mantra has 3-4 questions or 5 questions, and you answer those questions, and we ask questions from just that question bank, basically. So in one sense, anybody can pass that exam if you just go through those questions. But, what's the point of that if we have not acquired really that knowledge into our life? We're not applying it and living by it, right? So it's meant to be deeply contemplated upon, applied, think about what we are discussing each week and carefully see where, we might be a victim of this mentality of just trying to get some so-called knowledge and trying to find some hope or satisfaction in that. And of course, as you cultivate and apply, then we also want to share with others. And the more we educate ourselves and others, the more the avidya will be destroyed. And Prabhupada, made this institution predominantly as an educational institution, as all of you know, right? And like 4 of the principles or the 4 of the purposes of the 7 purposes of ISKCON actually have to do with systematically training, right? And the soul, our soul, is something that's actually naturally attracted to knowledge about itself. We're looking for that. And people are very hungry nowadays. We are seeing in the West that people's hearts have become very open. And the pandemic has really helped in that sense. People have seen so much harshness of the material nature. And Prabhupada had complete confidence that he knows the truth and the spirit soul, and that the spirit soul will benefit from this. And, his absolute confidence, where did it come? It came from confidence in the Lord and confidence in the knowledge that the Lord gave. And therefore, He never spoke anything in terms of it may help you, I would think about it, please consider it, It was just very absolute, the ways in which he spoke, because of such confidence. So anyway, something to think about, and then we will continue to mantra 10. But before that, any questions or comments on this mantra 9? Anyone? It's sobering, isn't it? It's very sobering. No thoughts, no questions, any reflections? Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Shamkan Prabhu.
Please accept my humble obeisance, Mataji. Just a thought. Just some information that I had read or heard, and some thoughts, Mataji.
Yeah.
To seek your input on that. This very same verse in the lineage of Madhvacharya, or in the commentaries of Madhvacharya, he lays a lot of emphasis on saying that those who cultivate the wrong knowledge, fine, but those who do not censure the wrong knowledge will actually andattama pravishanti. They are the ones who will enter into deeper darkness, is what he says. And going by what you were saying here, that we'll have to see what the real knowledge is used for. It should not be like a slaughterhouse education as such. But it's just an observation. It's just a thought, Mataji.
Yeah.
What are we as devotees doing for anything in terms of education in the world, especially, either for a child below in school level or even in college level?
Yeah.
A child has enough earnest eagerness to be mentally challenged, but we do not have any curriculum to mentally challenge a child. It's one thing to say we have the Gita, the Bhagavatam, but it's in a form right now, or Srila Prabhupada's books are in a form which can be appreciated by a person yearning for spiritual wisdom. But a child is not at a stage who wants to yearn or appreciate that wisdom. So a child needs information, a child needs challenge. So I just feel that it takes a lot of effort on our part to actually practically implement this verse. And we are nowhere near here.
Yeah, we're nowhere close. No, certainly well said. Yes, it's for each of us to think, how we can. Yeah, thank you for bringing up Madhvacharya's commentary too. Yeah, he particularly says that, those who worship with false knowledge, they fall into the blinding darkness. But then those who worship with true knowledge, but they don't correct the false knowledge, they fall into even greater darkness. Yeah, because it's like, it, and then you're not doing it. It's just like even for a physician, when you have the ability to help in some situation and you don't help a patient, right? Even out of the clinic, then you're guilty. There's consequences for that. Anyway, yeah, because ignorance is one thing, but then if you know and you don't do it, there's greater consequences. And yeah, I think there are some devotees certainly working on curriculum and trying to present Bhagavatam in a way that's suitable for children. Like, for example, Aruda Mataji, she's done so much work with her, Bhagavatam books for the children. You're familiar with those, I'm sure. And, there are others who are also, writing books and so on. And I think, yeah, there's so much service opportunity there, so much we can do. Yeah, and each of us can see what is the particular gift we have and try to see how we can apply this verse in our life. It'll be unique in each person's life. Somebody may be more inclined to cultivating this in the children, somebody maybe in the universities and schools, or the adults, or there's the whole range, and everything has its little impact a little bit at a time. Yeah. And who was the other person? Was it Amrita Lila?
Hare Krishna Mataji, yes.
Yeah.
So, your point, like one of the purpose of ISKCON is also re-establishing the education system in a Vedic way.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, these classes should be utilized not only for the clearing the ISOPANISAD exam, but for implementing in our life.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering how it is possible, but when we see like so many exalted devotees, they took a firm decisions on following it. But for me, like how it will be possible? Lot of things, material things going on. Kids are here.
Yeah. We can just do our little part. We don't have to be big. We don't have to do something big. And I think that's something sometimes it's the force of Kali Yuga, which looks at everything in terms of numbers. Success means numbers. Success means, huge things. And social media, is something that influences all of us so much nowadays. But we can all do our just little part, because ultimately, for real transformation to happen in a person's heart, right? Bhakti is transmitted from one person's heart into another person's heart, and the real transformation part really happens in small groups, The big lectures, the big, public speakers, there are some who are really empowered like that, and that's great because they draw crowds and they're gifted in that way, and that's wonderful. Is that you? Is that me? Perhaps not. I don't have that capacity. I'm not gifted in that way. But I do see that, maybe I'm gifted more in small groups and in cultivating people one-on-one, but out of those, maybe there will be some who are gifted in a different way. And so we just do our little part. Just meditate on how you can contribute. And Krishna will surely open up things, pray, contemplate, connect with that portion of the heart, which is really inspired. Maybe you're inspired by something in particular. We all get inspiration because Krishna gives all of us realization and inspiration. But sometimes, our little, insecurity sometimes blocks it. We don't allow that to really kind of go further, We just think, oh, I'm not so good. Oh, I'm not, what can I do? I'm just so insignificant. Look at that person. He can speak so well. He's so knowledgeable. He's so scholarly. He can sing so well. He can cook so well, or she can cook so well, whatever. They can dress deities so well. So what's my point? No, it doesn't matter. You matter to Krishna. So just serve Krishna and do your little part. Connect with that spark in your heart and allow that to grow. And start in a very small way and allow Krishna to lead you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mataji. Yeah. But at times, even in a smaller scale, I have realized and experienced sincere prayers and sincere willingness, that also manifests. Like if I'm really doing something and hankering for something, that Krishna helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does. He does. Yeah.
But we normally, I get confused. I sort of prayed, but can't move towards the reality, or maybe implementing in the life.
Yeah, meditate on this verse, Tadvag Visarga Janathaga Viplavo Yasmin Pratishlokam Abhattavatyapi. This is a verse that appears in the preface of every canto of Bhagavatam. Prabhupada puts it in the preface. You know, Prabhupada was feeling very small too. I mean, he's certainly not small, but he was feeling very small. What am I going to give this world? But you know, but this knowledge caused a revolution in his heart, and he had faith that anybody who comes in contact with this knowledge, even though imperfectly composed or presented, it has the capacity to cause a revolution in others' hearts. We can meditate on these verses.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, so let's get on to mantra 10 then. What happened? I don't know. Can you all see or? Oh, I think I didn't stop the previous one. I still see that full screen here. Oh, no, I closed it. 1 second. All right. So on to mantra 10. And the whole mantra 10 is about hearing from a proper source. So we have our disciplic succession in this picture to remind you of it. So what's the connection with the previous verse, mantra 9? To describe the result of cultivating ignorance and false knowledge, mantra 10 is going to explain that cultivating true knowledge actually brings a different result. And the theme is that real knowledge means following of a process to realize one's true spiritual nature. And this must be obtained from perfectly realized dhira. Dhira, or dhira means somebody who's realized spiritual master or realized person. A sober person. Somebody can only be sober when they have this kind of realization. Okay, so let's read mantra 10. Anya devahur vidyaya anyadahur vidyaya iti shushama dhiranam yenastad vichachakshire. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nations. So, what is real knowledge then? Again, we talked about what is real knowledge earlier, but we'll talk about it further here. What is real knowledge? And who is a dhira according to Bhagavad Gita? Where does this word dhira come in the Bhagavad Gita? A famous verse in the earlier chapters of Bhagavad Gita. Yes. So what is a dhira then? Who's a dhira?
A sober person.
Sober person. Who's a sober person? How does he become sober?
He's not bewildered by
anything. And what makes him not bewildered? Anybody can quickly pull up that purport. Prabhupada actually writes there something specific about who is a dhira. He has it. Yeah.
So dhira, who is not disturbed by happiness or any distress, he's neutral to both the situations.
Okay. So Prabhupada says in that text 213, he says that any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the super soul, and the nature, both material and spiritual nature, both, is called a Dhira, or a most sober man. And it's such a man who's never deluded by the change of bodies or by change of anything, right? So he knows who he is, he knows who's Krishna, he knows both the material and spiritual nature. So it's a real knowledge is certainly not book knowledge, mundane knowledge, impersonal knowledge. And this verse is further telling us that real knowledge is, it's a product of cultivation and a process or a whole culture of knowledge. It's not just some information, but it's this real knowledge is something it comes as a result of cultivating certain things. It's a whole culture, and somebody who has real knowledge, they have a whole particular kind of orientation in their existence. And Srimad Bhagavatam, of course, is something that really changes the orientation of our whole existence, our whole worldview, how we perceive everything completely changes. So it's also a specific, state of consciousness that comes about as a result of that cultivation. And, it's cultivation of specific values and qualities, right, that come by practical application of knowledge. So it involves many things, including reading books, but it involves many things. It's not just reading books, right? Because at the time of death, we cannot just show our Bhakti Shastri degrees, to the Yamadutas. They will really see our state of consciousness. So Prabhupada, he quotes from chapter 13. Krishna describes in chapter 13, text 8 to 12, this whole process of knowledge or culture of knowledge. And Prabhupada actually quotes all the 20 items here. So because Prabhupada has taken the pain to quote all these 20 items here, I think it's nice for us also just to briefly go through. We won't have time to dwell on them, but just say one or two points quickly, perhaps. So, I put the Sanskrit names, so amanitvam, humility, that's the first thing. And you can notice how Prabhupada uses, some little different ways of presenting them in Bhagavad Gita 13, 8 to 12 and over here. And that's coming because of his realization. So one should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. So we know that amanitvam, humility, is actually the first item of knowledge. And we're not meant to demand respect or demand knowledge, but we're supposed to be humble to actually get knowledge. And Prabhupada summarizes this as how one should just become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others, right? Sometimes, Indian devotees really get shocked when they see, Western devotees sometimes, because, they just don't have that culture. So the essential characteristic of a gentleman is that he respects others, and he's not always eager to sit in the front line dominating others, right? And an example, you can also look at the examples Prabhupada gives later. The example for this that Prabhupada gives is a boy thinks himself self-sufficient and pays no respect to the elderly man. And adambitvam, or pridelessness, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. So we do not go to the spiritual master simply for name and fame, or practice sadhana for that purpose. And the example Prabhupada uses of drivers of spaceships, and then ahimsa, or nonviolence. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. And as we are going along, please try to think of one quality that you already have to some extent, and that which helps you actually. And another quality which you don't have and would be nice for you to have for your growth in your spiritual life right now. What is a quality that might be most relevant for you to cultivate right now in your life? So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna translates this or defines nonviolence as to not put others in distress, right? So actually it means not giving spiritual knowledge to others. When we are not giving spiritual knowledge to others, or we're not actually nourishing others' faith in some way at all times, that means we're actually committing violence, because we are not, doing something that will help their true potential. So if one does not preach, one is doing violence, right? So then Shanti, tolerance. We can talk so much about each of these, but it'll take a long time. Shanti or tolerance. One should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. It's Radhanath Swami often says that the greatness of a person is known by how, tolerant he is in very, very provoking situations. Because it's easy to be tolerant when everything is fine, but when something is not right, then how tolerant are we? So we have how to build tolerance. We have to practice bearing insult and dishonor from others. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna, how can we recognize if someone is, situated in transcendence? And Krishna tells him to look at how he reacts to provoking situations. Because, everyone does well when there's nothing provoking. Arjavam, or simplicity. One should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others. So without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can, disclose the real truth even to an enemy. So one should avoid duplicity in dealing with others. Do means two, and, two things basically. So there's one thing we say outside or do outside, but we have something else inside. A simple person has only one thing in the mind and the same thing outside. And when we are duplicitous, we cannot acquire true knowledge. So we should, work for the benefit of others with a lot of straightforwardness. And of course, being straightforward doesn't mean that we have to be blunt in how we present the truth. We can still, because that's the other austerity of speech that Prabhupada describes in the Bhagavad Gita, or Krishna describes, that truth should also be pleasing to hear. So while you're straightforward, it has to be pleasing. So these first 5 qualities are the qualities that are required to actually approach a guru. And then the 6th quality is actually approaching a guru, Acharya Pasanam. I don't know why they're automatically advancing now. Oops, it's just going. I have no idea why it's doing that. Okay, so Acharya Upasanam is one should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization, and one must submit himself to such a spiritual master and render him service and ask relevant questions. So inquiry, submission, and service, not just kind of show up for class, but sincerely have this inquiry spirit and also the submission simultaneously. Like the famous example, perhaps you've all heard, one devotee went to Bhaktisiddhanta and asked, I have a question, and Bhaktisiddhanta just kind of didn't answer the question. And, he asked him to go do some service for the pujari. And so then he does the service for the pujari, and then later, I don't know if it was later the same day or the next day, but, Bhaktisiddhanta asked, so you had a question? And then the person said, no, actually, I got the answer to my question. Through the service, he actually got the answer. So some of us are a little bit more intellectually oriented, And so we ask a lot of questions and so on. But it's very important for us to also simultaneously cultivate service, because service mode has to be accompanied in that inquiries that we make for us to really grasp the subject matter. And then, Shaucham, or cleanliness. In order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. I guess I won't go into it too much. Cleanliness. Thairyam, one must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. I find this very interesting. So Thairyam means steadiness, being very determined to make progress in spiritual life. But I find it interesting how Prabhupada connects steadiness to be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. So he's linking steadiness to knowledge of Shastra, which is correct, actually, right? Because who's a Madhyamadikari? Madhyamadikari is at the stage of Nishta. And one of the main characteristics is that he has sufficient knowledge of the scripture so that, his faith doesn't waver anymore. He becomes very fixed. His practice becomes very fixed because of that conviction. So one becomes steady by regularly studying and hearing. So many times devotees ask these questions: how can I become steady? How can, I feel enthusiastic one day, but I don't feel another day? How to become steady? You become steady, regularly hear, regularly study Shastra. And I'm sure this is something you're already experiencing even through the process of doing your Bhakti Shastri, because you're more regularly studying now. And a certain kind of steadiness and, a certain kind of conviction and light is coming into your life, I'm sure. Atma Vinigraha, or self-control. One should completely refrain from practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. So not accept anything which is detrimental. So one should completely refrain from anything not supporting our self-realization. And this self-control is not, like the impersonalist. Indriyarthesha vairagya. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. Are we eating to live or living to eat? Yes, very important. Lecture of instruction, Atyahara, as well as the first verse. So important, these fundamental essences. If we cannot control the tongue, we cannot actually control anything else in our spiritual life. And it's very difficult to make progress. That's actually the first step to self-realization. And anahankara means absence of false ego. So impersonalists, they deny all ego, but we only deny the false ego. And one should not, falsely identify himself with the material body, as Prabhupada is saying here, and nor should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. Janma mrityu jara vyadi dukkha doshana darshanam. So this is birth, death, old age, disease. There's no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. Ashakti, one should not be attached to more than the necessities of life required for spiritual advancement. Again, the principle of Atyahara and Prayasa, right? And being attached even to the minimum, if it's not meant for the purpose of spiritual realization, even that can become actually an obstacle. So the essence is not about how little we have. It's not just renunciation, but rather, how are we seeing that in Krishna connection? And Anhabi Swanga Putradhara Grahadishu. One should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scriptures ordain. I'm just going to go through it a little quickly. One should not be happy or distressed over desirables and undesirables, knowing that such feelings are just created by the mind. So family life is highly regulated in Shastras. But this does not mean that we have to get rid of family life altogether. We have to just learn the difference between affection and attachment. There should be affection, but not attachment, passionate attachment. So Srila Prabhupada, tells us that a family that hears together, chants together, worships together, actually stays together. And the whole relationship becomes very, very conducive with Guru and Krishna in the center, right? And this one should not be happy or distressed over desirables or undesirables. Yeah, something may come, something may go, but how are we reacting? And we can observe also if there's some particular quality you're trying to cultivate, right? You can study how this quality is manifesting in a contemporary devotee around you, as well as a previous acharya. Just observe, because when we observe and ask, you can inquire from them how to develop this quality and so on, what helps them, what doesn't help them. It really helps so much, because when we can glorify and appreciate the qualities of exalted devotees, then it becomes much easier for us to develop them. It's also Ramanujacharya's principle. And Krishna also says that those who appreciate his qualities, he lends his qualities literally, so it's nice. Mai chananya yogena bhakti ravyabhicharani. One should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead Shri Krishna and serve him with rapt attention. And one should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere for spiritual culture, and one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. So this is actually in Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned as 2 items. Here it's mentioned as 1 item. Liking for living in a solitary place and detachment from the general masses. Those are the 2 items in Bhagavad Gita. And one should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent. So in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes, acceptance of the importance of self-realization and philosophical search of truth. So again, 2 things. So that's how over there it's 20, over here it's 18. And what does Krishna say in the end? He says, all these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. And what are we hearing here? These 18 items combine to form a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. Except for these, all other methods are considered to be in the category of nations. So these qualities, this process of knowledge, it's meant to be cultivated. And knowledge means actually to see everything in relation to Krishna. And who is it that can see everything in relation to Krishna? The Mahabhagavad devotee, as we said earlier. They don't hate, they don't lament, they don't have any anxiety. And that's because of their Krishna consciousness. So the fact is that Krishna is actually there behind these qualities. And because of that, they're able to see everything in relation to Krishna. So if we don't become, for example, equipoised, one of the qualities, if we don't become equipoised, but we're only learning how to solve difficult situations and so on, then that's not real knowledge, right? Like a Madhyamadhikari or Uttamadhikari, he is able to see that all difficulties that they have in their life, they're actually related to Krishna. The difficulties are connected with Krishna. So it's necessary to be equipoised in order to have the right knowledge about the situations, we're actually confronting. And we need to have a certain humility to be able to see things as they are. Like, for example, somebody who doesn't have any faith in God, like an atheist, what might they say when something happens? They may say, oh, God doesn't exist, or God is just nonsense because, there is suffering. So because they don't have humility, so they just put God down. They cannot see something higher. Or we heard, of course, about the cobbler and Brahmana story recently. Or we hear about, demons like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu. They have big brains. They have a lot of knowledge. I mean, it's amazing when you hear the philosophy that Hiranyakashipu speaks in the 7th canto. Somebody's microphone is unmuted. Big brain, but no humility. And therefore, they couldn't understand God. Right? So if we have some humility, if we cultivate these qualities, then when we look around us, we examine the devotees, then we will see that devotees have many wonderful qualities and we can appreciate them. And when we don't see nice things, then we don't have complete knowledge, and it's hard to grow also because of our particular attitude. So important to have this culture of knowledge. It's extremely vital to get the right kind of knowledge. And it's very directly connected to how we see things, or basically how we're seeing the Krishna connection with all things. And here's a nice ass picture. By advancement of material knowledge, modern man is simply being converted into an ass. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this famous song by Bhakti Thakur, where he's talking about this Jada Vidya, or material knowledge. So there's Brahma Vidya and there's Jada Vidya. Jada Vidya is, knowledge about matter, and Brahma Vidya is knowledge about spirit. So I'm not going to read it. You can read it later because I'm looking at time. There's just 5 minutes. Let's just finish. And then the last part of this is basically the instructions of Vidya must be acquired from a Dhira. And who's a Dhira? He's one who's not disturbed by material illusion. He doesn't hanker. He doesn't lament. He realizes that the material body and mind are both foreign elements. And he has submissively heard from a Dhira. So then that's how he can become a Dhira. He has realized the knowledge and he has followed the regulated principles. And then just a couple of quotes by Prabhupada. So here's one word, iti shushruma. Shushruma means heard. The word meaning is there. It is heard. In the Vedic disciplic succession, it is never said, it is experience. That is the secret of Vedic understanding. No student will. Just like people are now engaged in researching what is there in the moon planet. So this is material policy, to try to understand things by his own experience. Pratyaksha, direct experimental knowledge. The Vedic understanding is different. It is Shruti. Shruti means to hear from authoritative source. That is real knowledge. And another one here. So people are searching what is God, and searching, and they fail. They say, oh, there's no God. I am God. Finished. You see, this is not possible. Here it is said, iti shushruma. This is Vedic knowledge. It's heard. Shushruma. Where from Shushruma? From the storekeeper? No. Dhiranam Shushruma. Iti Shushruma. Dhiranam. What is Dhiranam? From the sober sect. Not this fanatic sect, but the sober sect Dhira. Dhira means whose senses are not agitated by material influence, or Swami or Goswami. There's a lecture on ISOPANISAD also. So I already gave you this exercise, but please pick one quality that you already have to some extent and one that would be really good for you to develop right now for your own spiritual growth, and make a very specific plan for cultivating both of these. So like a SMART goal, make a SMART goal. And then Prabhupada also gives many examples of each of these different qualities, so you can try to see if you can find them, which example he gives for which quality at your own time. Any questions or comments? Okay. Everybody is satisfied or everybody is fallen asleep? One of the two. All right. Thank you all very much then. I will see you just in 2 days and we'll do the next 2 verses. Okay. Hare Krishna.